Having your child apprehended as a result of poor lifestyle decisions is a horrific feeling. Today's guest, Jolene Whitton, worked for Child and Family Services here in Saskatchewan, and she got lost in addiction along the way. After only 4 days on the job, Jolene was expected to execute an apprehension solo, and that set the tone for the rest of her time with Child and Family Services. Soon after she started, she was also introduced to cocaine, which turned into crack, which turned into a debilitating addiction that ultimately cost her her job and had her own children apprehended. In this episode, we talked to Jolene about her experiences in child apprehension and what it was like being lost in addiction in such a place. What's up, everybody? My name's Dan. I'm joined in studio by my wife, Donna. If you want to support the channel, hit that subscribe button, give us a like, drop us a comment. This is Hard Knocks Talks, your addictions podcast. Now, let's get into our conversation with Jolene Whitton. What's up, Jolene? How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for reaching out, by the way. Is there anything that you'd like to say before we jump in?
I want to say, regardless of the field you work in and the positions that you're in, anybody can fall into addiction. And regardless of the stigma of what it is, don't be afraid to reach out for help.
Mm-hmm. Beautifully put.
You were a child protection worker, right? Was that your title?
My title was a case aide and emergency duty worker.
Okay. For Child and Family Services here in Saskatchewan.
Yes.
Tell us how you got started in that.
Well, I've always been a people person, and I like to see, I believe I have the perspective that I can see the good in people no matter what. And so, I always love helping people. I love being with people. Child and Family Services was never necessarily something that I saw myself doing. Prior to being in Child and Family Services, I did a little bit of everything. I worked with the elderly in a care home. I worked with the Canadian Mental Health Association. I worked in the school as an educational assistant. And then I worked in young offenders.
And of course, it's hard to get on the show without having a history in substance use. Now, tell us about, was that something that was in your life throughout all of this, or is it something that just sort of became a problem after you got involved with Child and Family Services?
No. So, as a child or a teenager from probably about, I'd say 15 to 18, I was using, never anything overly over the top. I did a lot of ecstasy, some MDMA. I used cocaine a few times. And then I found out I was pregnant at 18 with my son. And so I had quit everything until I started working at Child and Family Services again.
Did you say you worked in justice?
Yes. Yes, young offenders.
Young offenders. Tell us a little bit about that. Walking into something like that, were you shocked at the things that you were seeing, or was this you were expecting that?
I was kind of expecting it. It had its days. I myself, I had a really good relationship with a lot of the youth that were in there. So, I never necessarily had any problems working there. I actually really enjoyed it.
Your dog's head is giant.
Yes, it is. He's a big boy.
He takes up a half of the screen. So I guess what I'm trying to do here is I'm sort of trying to paint a picture of your progression professionally. Right. So okay. You left from working with young offenders into family services. Now tell us about that. Why did you leave that and go into what you went into?
So the reason I had left young offenders is actually there was a young boy who came in on intake who wound up having a seizure. And unfortunately, when someone first comes in, they're kept in kind of a segregation unit, or were at that time. And none of us had keys to that unit. They had to go in from the control in the front. So we were radioing, trying to get access to this boy to help him. And unfortunately, because of the time lag in that, it seemed like I was watching this poor kid seize for what seemed like forever. And I couldn't get in there to help. And that part became a little too much for me, and I just couldn't go back.
Did you take any time off? And did that affect your life in any other way?
I mean, that was my first time ever dealing with a seizure. I mean, it's something that like I've had first aid training, so I knew what I had to do, but I couldn't get access to them to do it.
Yeah.
So I mean,
That's
I didn't
Well,
take any time off. I was working just casual at that point. So I can't even remember back then to tell you when I went in, but it was at that point where I started looking for another job.
yeah.
Hmm.
So off to the ministry you go, thinking that things were going to
Hmm.
be better.
Yeah, or more stable, and I was wrong.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So tell us. I mean, you told me before the show, but for anyone who hasn't heard, so you became a case support worker, and immediately you met coworkers, and tell us how your substance use got started again.
So it started off myself and two of my coworkers went to go watch some male strippers in North Battleford for a night out.
Oh, the male
And
strippers, they
after,
always do that.
oh yes, oh I
Hmm.
know, right? I should have known.
Yeah.
um, but we went out, and after a few drinks, it turned out that one of my coworkers had brought cocaine with her.
Hmm.
And I think for myself and my other coworker, it was, why not? We've had a few drinks. It's been so long for me since I did anything. It's not going to affect me.
Hmm.
And so, of course, we engaged.
Hmm. So have a look at Rise North's comment.
Mhm. So, thanks for the comment, Rise North. Says, after 15 years in the service field, I am ready to walk away. This job has broken my heart and kicked my ass so many times.
So this case support worker, did you get into child apprehension like right away?
Yes, actually. So how it worked is I started off as an emergency duty worker. I didn't start off as a case aide right away. And
Okay.
so for an emergency duty worker, how it works, like the training for it, it's unbelievable. You're by yourself. And so for the training, I was supposed to have 2 weeks where I shadowed someone and then 2 weeks where someone shadowed me. But my first week, I think I was on day 4, and the person who I was supposed to be shadowing had gotten into a car accident. And a call came in where it was very obvious a child was going to need to be apprehended, but I was by myself. So I called the on call supervisor and was told I need to proceed and go anyways. So I'm out there 4 days into the job, no training, doing my first apprehension
By
Wow.
yourself.
by myself.
What's going through your head?
Like I didn't know what I was walking into. I mean, I like 4 days prior, I mean, we had a couple calls, but never an apprehension.
So this
And
was your
here, this one,
not sorry, I just get excited. So not only was this your first apprehension alone, it was your very first apprehension at all.
yes.
And they didn't give
Yeah.
you any sort of procedure to follow. Go knock on this
I
door
mean,
and take these kids away.
there's a Child and Family Services Act where I had to follow. And of course, I could call the on call supervisor for support.
Yeah.
But I mean, for someone that has no experience in that field, and I'm going in there by myself, having the support of someone by the phone isn't enough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. How did it go?
The children were ended up being apprehended. And I mean, it was a messy situation. I don't want to get too deep into it, obviously, because of confidentiality and that. I don't want
Yeah.
to give out any details, but
Yeah.
it was a messy one, and it was one that stuck with me.
Did you have any support after that? Like, did you have a
No,
debrief or anything?
no,
Nothing.
you don't get that in Ministry of Social Services. Myself and my coworker, we had death threats, and someone posted on social media saying that he was going to come find us, find our kids, and put a hot one through our heads. And we got no debriefing. We got nothing. We get told, here's the EFAT phone number. You can call them and maybe get 6 sessions of counseling.
So tell us about how this affected your substance use. Now, was this something that you did occasionally for a little while, or did like the availability of it through your coworkers plus the obvious trauma that you're taking on throughout this, like how did that all play together?
So it started out after that night, me and my coworkers, we would have our girls' night every couple weeks. And that was our debriefing,
Mm-hmm.
was us getting together. And it kind of progressed from there. It went from, every 2 weeks to every week to every couple days. And then it got to the point, where you're doing coke, your nose is so stuffed, you can't do anymore. And I knew that smoking it was one of my other coworkers' preferred methods.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, teach me how to cook it.
Because you ended up leaving there, and then things got worse. But what was the boiling point for you? Like where did it come to that you left?
I believe it was early 2022, I ended up getting a hysterectomy due to cervical cancer. And at that point, because I was off for 6 weeks, I had nothing to do. I was smoking almost every day. And at one point, someone came and left something at my house. I thought it was heroin. It wasn't. I thought, cool, I'm going to try it. It was fentanyl. And I had actually overdosed. And luckily, if my husband wasn't home, I would be dead. He was left performing CPR on me for about 3 or 4 minutes until the ambulance arrived. And it took 3 doses of Narcan and being shocked twice to get me back up.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, you mentioned that there was some trafficking going on and stuff.
No, it wasn't trafficking. I mean, like, I would help, like, if I was out, I would help people score. I mean, I myself wasn't trafficking, but I would point people into the direction. Of course, if you're an addict and you're out partying with people and someone's out and they have cash, it's like, hey, I know where to get some.
Yeah.
And there were times where that would happen. I would go to work the next day, or I would get a call, and I'm out apprehending these people's children because they were partying that night with me before.
And yet, like you mentioned, you had a child.
I have 2.
You have 2. And like, if you don't mind me asking, like, how old are your kiddos?
My son is 12 and my daughter's 9.
Yeah, she was sitting here relating with us. We were out there, like, getting them to be quiet, and I was sort of lamenting in here earlier. She's like, I get you, man. I hear you.
So, I mean, in the grand scheme of things and under the Child Protection Act and all that stuff, I mean, your kids were at risk of apprehension, correct?
My kids were. So after my overdose of fentanyl, the RCMP had called in an intake with me to my office, and I wound up having a file opened on myself, and my kids were placed with my parents for a place of safety.
And how were you treated by your, I presume, coworkers?
So it didn't come from anyone from my office. The workers came from Saskatchewan.
Okay.
The first investigator I have, well, and see, here's the thing, is my investigator was someone I had never met. And my ongoing worker was someone who had previously worked in North Battleford that I myself had worked with.
What was that like for you when that knock at the door came?
It was devastating. I in my head, because I worked with the system, I felt like I knew better, or I should know how to hide it. Or I guess I just thought I was untouchable. And obviously I wasn't.
Was there also some sort of a sense of like knowing how challenging it can be, and the fact like the goalpost often gets moved on people, and people are basically set up to fail in obtaining their children back in their care? For you, that, like, I know, like, for myself, I worked in a firm where we advocated for families to get their children back, and I knew the uphill battle that I was facing the minute that happened, so I just like
that happened to us too.
I caved. Like I just completely imploded and gave up. Like, I was just like, we're screwed.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there were times where I couldn't get in touch with my worker for 3 weeks. I just wasn't getting answered. And I mean, I myself, like, I couldn't believe it, because even like back when I was sober working in that field, like that wasn't heard of. If someone is reaching out for you for help, you help that person. And it felt like I was just ignored.
Yeah. Did you ever come to a place when you were doing this work where you felt like you were, like, did you feel like you were doing good? Holy cow, look at that big dog.
Well, that lightened the mood.
Yeah. He just says, like, let's keep it light here, Dan. Let's just keep it light. Yeah. So, but anyways, like, because it's really challenging work, and I obviously, I've never done it personally, but I've heard enough stories and I've had enough conversations to know that, like, everybody gets into this work because they want to help, right? But it comes to a place where they realize that this system is so rigid and fractured at the same time that you really, like, there's not a lot you can do to help. So when you
before I started using, I felt a long time ago like we weren't helping.
Yeah. And that continued on to the end then? Like, you knew that you weren't doing good, like, in your heart kind of thing?
Yes.
Like, did that fuel your addiction?
I think so. It definitely did. Yeah. Like, I mean, personally, I feel like The ministry doesn't care about putting families back together. I fully believe that they care about keeping kids safe, but they don't care about the parents, and they don't really care about getting them together. Like they don't care about preventative measures. You
Mm-hmm.
can't reach out to the Ministry of Social Services and say, hey, I need help. They don't get involved until things are too late and basically your kid needs to be taken.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Did you ever find yourself questioning that approach and and then when we talk about keeping children safe, like, okay, I get it, but what about the long-term trauma of being separated from their family?
Yeah.
You know, and that lack of familial support, like the trauma that is just like it's such an umbrella, like it rips families apart,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Well, I mean, once families are together, the ministry will maybe stay involved for a couple months after the kids are returned to the parents. But then after that, it's just ties are cut until the next intake comes in.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's no follow up to make sure that people are connected to supports.
Mm-hmm. And yet kids entering foster system, like I've heard stories about foster and obviously like some horrible stories, but some of the things I've heard about is like overloading houses, and then
Hmm.
people who have these houses end up with like an overabundance of support in a sense. So people that own the houses don't really do any of the work. There's all these support workers in the home. Like I find myself questioning, like, why aren't we doing that within the actual birth home as opposed to putting them into foster, all that trauma, overloading the house, and it just seems to be such an inept approach.
Hmm.
I
Oh no, and I mean I totally agree. Like there were so many times where there's no placements available in the North Battleford area, so kids are being sent up north to Beauval, or kids are being sent to Regina, and it's then like how do visits even occur? Because
Mm-hmm.
now you're not only taking kids away from their family, but you're taking them out of their community, away from relatives.
Mm-hmm.
mm. And
And
here
there's
you
like
are
and
stuck in the middle.
yeah. Yeah, and I mean like there's so much funds that are going elsewhere where if these are put into preventative measures,
Mm-hmm.
like so many families would have been saved.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I felt like our family wasn't so far gone that we couldn't have benefited from at least an attempt, but there was no attempt. It was
Yeah, no, it
just
was
No.
they yeah, for us, I mean, they showed up at the door and in 20 minutes our child was gone, and yeah, that's a long story that our listeners have all heard
yeah,
before.
yeah, exactly.
So,
So how long has it been since you left the ministry?
I have, it would have been, it'll be 2 years in September.
mhm,
Okay.
mhm.
Wow.
And tell us, what was life like after you left? So you left, and almost at that same time when you left, your children were taken. Is that right?
No, they were taken while I was still technically there, but I was placed on an administrative leave.
So this all happened like around in the same time, like your whole life got flipped upside down.
Yeah.
And nobody came in to offer you any sort of assistance in any capacity at all?
No. I mean,
Was
not work wise. I mean, the investigator I had was, I mean, of course, telling me what to do or what I needed to do. But
Yeah.
the thing is that when you're working in that field and you're talking to the addictions counselors, you're talking to the psychiatrists, like the AA counselors, NA counselors, like every day from 9 to 5, and you have that relationship with them, how can you approach them and be like, hey, I need help now? I know for myself, that was my biggest struggle is I saw myself going downhill, but how can I reach out for help? And then of course there's always the fear that, if I have that relationship with these people, I know my coworkers do. So how do I know that anything I tell them is not going to be relayed?
Mm. Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you left. Your children are gone. You're unemployed. Then what?
I went downhill for a while. It took quite a couple. It took a few months for me to finally get my shit together and
Mm-hmm.
try and improve myself.
What did those few months look like?
It was just empty. I sat in my bedroom all day long, smoking crack, only caring about when I can get my next fix.
Mm-hmm.
That was all I cared about. I felt too much shame and too much anger towards myself to actually go and visit my kids.
Mm-hmm. I can relate to that. I mean, yeah, my efforts to see my son were thwarted, but then there was also that it's like indescribable that level of shame and guilt and yeah. there are really no words for it, hey?
Mm-hmm.
No, there's not.
Yeah. Let's take a quick little break here, and
So Dan can say a whole bunch of words.
so I can say a whole bunch of words. I'll be right back. Okay. If you are struggling with the substance use of a loved one or have tragically lost a loved one to drug-related harms, reach out to Stronger Together Canada peer-led support groups by Mums Stop the Harm. If you are looking for help with criminal record suspensions, the Elizabeth Fry Society of Saskatchewan covers all associated costs for women or gender-diverse individuals to apply for criminal record suspensions. Reach out to Chelsea at 306-668-0635. If you are a professional and wish to deepen your understanding of substance use disorder, check out the AIMS SK program through the College of Medicine at the University of Saskatchewan, designed to help you improve health outcomes for individuals with substance use disorder. To make contact or learn more about today's sponsors, check out our new merch, or if you want to show us some love and buy us some coffee, all of those links are in the show notes below. Now, I'm interested because, like as Donna was saying before, it can be extremely challenging to get your children back after an apprehension. The goalposts can be moved, or you can slip, or whatever. What did that look like for you when you finally came out of that place? You know, where you said you felt hopeless and embarrassed and all of that, and like, what did that first step look like for you?
Well, for us, the first step was, I mean, obviously, like we had gone, I think it was about 3 weeks without smoking, and we were sent for drug tests.
Who's
My
we?
husband's came back, myself and my husband.
Okay, so you were using with your partner.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And so we were sent for drug tests, and his came back clean, and mine came back still positive. And it was devastating for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it had been about 3 weeks, and, you know, like they say, like, oh, well, it only stays in your system for up to 5 days.
Even then,
But
that's a stretch.
yeah. And I mean, and they wouldn't listen to me. I was reaching out to doctors, and because I mean, I had my hysterectomy, I am a big girl. So, I mean, everything, it is going to stay in my system longer, but like, it just, I wasn't listened to. At that point, I couldn't even get unsupervised access to my kids. My husband could, but I couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, that one also really set me back, because I felt like even though I was doing what was asked for me, it wasn't enough. And I was still showing positive. And it took a long time. Like, I think it took almost nearly probably maybe 4.5 weeks before I finally had that clean screen. And at that point, nothing still changed. And I think it took about 2 or 3 more clean screens before we could even have unsupervised access with our kids. Another couple more, and we got them for weekends. And then they were returned. My file was closed, and I never heard from them again.
That sounds like, in the big scheme of things went pretty well then for you.
Well, I mean, it did for a while after I got the ongoing worker. In the investigation phase, I mean, I probably wasn't the easiest person to work with. I can definitely say that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I always said to my coworkers, like, you know, even while we were using or while we were drinking, it was, you know, we're going to be a lot worse than any of our clients would be if you try and come take our kids. Like, I would be going off in handcuffs. Yeah. So, you know, I definitely I wasn't an easiest person to work with. Mm-hmm. I mean, any of the supports that they suggested to me, I wasn't comfortable going to, because I already had that relationship. Mm-hmm. At one point, I was self-harming and was arrested under the Mental Health Act by the police and taken to mental health for an assessment. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it was a rocky road. After we did get clean, and the drug test started coming back positive, then things were going smoother. But for the first probably like 6 months, it was a rocky road.
Yeah.
Well, we got coerced basically into signing Section 9. That was, well, how long was ours? 9 months?
I don't remember any of that. Like, I remember being in the office. I remember our worker saying that, you know, what did he say? He had to open the door because the smell of meth gave him a headache or something. Yeah, I remember that. And, you know, fair enough. Honestly, maybe it did. You know, you didn't have to be a dick about it.
Yeah.
So.
And the way that things were going for us, it was so different than the way that we did things in North Battleford. Like, I mean, I was never offered a family service agreement, was one thing. Like, I never had a case plan signed for me. So I never knew, like, other than the odd text and telling me what to do, like, nothing was clear and concise as to what was being asked of me.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Do you think that you faced judgment and stigma because you were working for them, and like, do you think that they were trying to hold you to a higher standard?
100%.
Yeah.
And yet, and then for my husband, like, I was being asked of all these things. Like, they wanted me to go to an addictions counselor. They wanted me to see a psychiatrist. Nothing in writing, of course, just what they were verbally asking for me. And they asked nothing of my husband. And he was
Yeah.
living in the home and everything, but he wasn't obligated to do anything.
Yeah.
So there was definitely, like, they were holding me to a higher standard.
Yeah, they treated Donna and I quite a bit differently too.
Mhm.
Yeah. So once the file's closed, that's it now? They're not even checking in on you? There's no sort of after follow-up preventative, or what did they, a protection plan or anything like that?
Nothing.
So you're just
No,
cured
I
now?
haven't heard from them.
In the ministry's eyes, you're like, wow, she's like $1 million now.
Yep.
Did they did anyone say, like, do you want to come back?
No. I mean, the people that I had worked with, and even some of them still, like, when I see them now, they tell me they miss me and they say I should come back and do the emergency duty worker job and all that. And I mean, part of me wants to, like, I feel like now that I've lived this, I feel like I would be a lot more of an asset to these families and actually being able to help them.
Yeah.
But according to the ministry's eyes, because I have that tarnish now on my record, it'll never happen.
Mm-hmm. And even if you could, with the best intentions,
I don't think I'd want to.
But could you? Like, would you be too bound by policy to act in a way that you would feel aligns with your moral compass?
Exactly. I don't think I would be able to. Like, I would go and I would see these parents that are struggling with addiction, and I'd be being told by my supervisor to do an apprehension, and that's just not something I feel like I would be able to do anymore.
Yeah. Is there anything that stood out in your mind, or when you were doing this, even, and maybe now you have a bit even more clarity, even, but like, are there some policies in particular that stood out to you that were particularly toxic, that were particularly, like, unhelpful and maybe even harmful?
Like, there were definitely, I wouldn't say policies, but there were definitely, like, odd cases I would find. Like, there were some caregivers that have a criminal record 3 pages long. Or people would be calling in for foster parents saying that these foster parents or these caregivers are using. And the ministry's eyes, and they said it once before, if we're going to be drug testing our caregivers, then we're just not going to bother. So it's, these people that like extended family members that are willing to care for these people or these kids. And if someone calls and gives false information, the ministry will just take their word for it. So they won't even drug test these, like, foster families or potential caregivers. And so it's just, they're taking these kids away from extended family for no reason.
So what does your recovery look like then? Like, on the other side of all of this,
And
how long have you been in recovery now, Jolene?
Well, I can't even.
So I'm coming up on
now. She's just getting right in here.
It'll be 13 months for me on February 20th.
Yay!
Excellent.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And what does that look like for you? I mean, being in the position that you were in, are you like, do you go to meetings, or like, what does your recovery look like?
My husband and I, we lean on each other. And I mean, after getting clean, I did regain, like, a lot of my friends that I did lose throughout my recovery. And they have all been really amazing. Like, and same with my mom. Like, for my recovery, I don't go to formal supports. I lean on my family.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I've completely switched gears. Like, I'm now, instead of being in the social services field, I'm a florist. I'm a bit of an animal hoarder, if you couldn't tell. And I love my plants. And so
So you've just got the 2 dogs?
I have 2 dogs. I did have 2 cats. I just lost one of my cats last week.
Oh, no.
And I have a bearded dragon.
Wow. That's an unexpected.
Yeah. Cool.
Very cool.
Yeah. Susan in California says, congrats on 13 months.
Thank you.
Yeah. So what else? I mean, is there anything else that you want to hit on? Anything else you want to make sure that you throw in here before we let you go tonight?
No, well, I mean, just kind of what I said at the beginning. Like, if you're in one of those positions where you feel like you need to be the one that's helping people and you're struggling, just try and let go of that stigma and get the help you need before it's too late.
And tell me now, what would that help? Would you knowing what the access to services looks like as a prevention, well, not a prevention worker, but as a case assistant, what would you recommend? Like, can you make any recommendations as to, okay, I'm starting to slide, who can I talk to? Because I mean, if you go to the ministry, they're just going to be like, they're going to do what they did to you.
So, I mean, if you don't want to reach out to the ministry for support, you can obviously contact like a psychologist and addictions counselor. I mean, the waits are absolutely terrible, at least here in North Battleford, but you don't need like you can just go in and create your own intake. You don't need a referral for any of the mental health and addiction services here. You can take NA and AA online. And one of the best things about that is if you are struggling at 2:00 in the morning where there's no help available, you can go and you can join an online class or NA class in Sydney, Australia. So you know, if you're struggling late at night, there are supports you can get. 7 Cups Online is an amazing online therapy that's free to use.
7 Cups?
There's just, 7 Cups.
Okay, tell us about that.
So it's an online website. I mean, you take a training. So, I mean, you could be talking to just somebody like me. And so it's just people that are trained to listen. They're not going to give you advice, but they're going to listen. So it's just, if you need an outlet, that's an amazing one to go to.
Wow, cool. All right, Jolene, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for reaching out and being willing. And I guess that's it. We'll let you go, my friend.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Thanks, Jolene. Take care.
See you later.
If you got anything out of that, please click that subscribe button and give this episode a like. If you don't have time to sit and listen to us for an hour, you can always find our recordings on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts. But we love it when you join us on YouTube, so come check us out here. We go live at least twice a week, or it's who knows, sometimes it's once a week. I don't even know what to say about that part anymore because it's all over the damn place. We do it as much as we can. That's all I got for you tonight. Thanks so much. Take care, everyone.
Say, this is Hard Knocks Talks.